Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees no new releases, as it is said to be, in the words of of Deadline and also of Box Office Pro, a sleepy weekend at the box office. But Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is still expected to once again, for the fifth week in a row, take the #1 spot at the box office. Expected to make another $12.7 million. Now, of course, we do take that with a grain of salt, as it was Box Office Pro that last weekend had well overprojected what the film was going to do then. The film ended up coming in a few $1 million at least below the expectations, and so therefore we do take, as we always do, any of the numbers that we get from these box office prognosticators with a grain of salt. Violent Night is expected to have a second place finish once again, but percentage-wise, in its second week of release, expected to have a pretty strong hold of only 39%. So we'll talk about this and also the future of some of the other films as we prepare for the coming of Avatar 2, The Way of the Water, the way of the giant blue Smurf people returning once again with water. Yes, indeed. CGI. Gotta love it. It's atrocious. Anyway, before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, lap that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Smash the rumble button as well. It really does help and does mean a lot. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, as I mentioned, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Wakanda Forever, expected to make $12.7 million this weekend, bringing its total domestic to $411.7 million, still at over 3,800 screens. This is expected to be a 28% drop from last week, which ended up being around 60+% drop versus the predictions, which were, again, from Box Office Pro, to be closer to the 50% range. Obviously, the film did not perform as well as Box Office Pro had indicated, and they had some reasons as to why that was the case, but ultimately, right, their projections were indeed wrong. I'm wondering if these are a little bit more tempered just because of the fact there are no new releases this weekend. There is not a whole lot going on domestically this weekend, and so in anticipation of the release of Avatar 2, this might leave some openings, some last-minute opportunities for Black Panther to make a decent amount of money before Avatar, of course, takes over the entire box office. I really hope Avatar 2 fails. You all know my thoughts about Avatar in general, but still, Black Panther is going to have a little bit of extra room to run in this instance. Some people have been pointing out, say, that it has been falling behind the numbers that were posted by Doctor Strange, right? As you can see, there was $4 million made by Doctor Strange at the same point in its release on the fourth Monday. Only $1 million made for this film, and then on the Tuesdays, they are not too far off. Regardless of that, we still see that when it comes to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, it is still tracking about $20 million ahead of where the film was at the same point in its release, and we are expected to see that continue throughout the weekend. Right at the end of the weekend of the fifth weekend, Doctor Strange was at $388 million, whereas we will, again, projected to see Black Panther be at around 411, so still going to be around $20 million or so pacing ahead. So if that $20 million continues to hold in that way, that's the reason why we still see the possibility of that, again, that end range being somewhere between 450 and 500, especially with the holiday season coming up. Holiday season does not always guarantee that any film is going to necessarily make money, but it definitely does still, give some credence to those that are out there saying, well, there might be some extra money to be made there. And again, the reason why we can even say that that's a possibility is because we'll look at what happened over Thanksgiving holiday. The Thanksgiving holiday was very, very kind and very generous to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. As soon as people went back to work, we saw that the box office pretty much went back to normal. So the question is going to be, how much does that impact it? How many theaters does Disney keep with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, especially seeing that Avatar 2 is going to have one of the most massive releases, and with a runtime of over 3 hours, they're going to need to have it in as many locations and as many screens as possible, because it means that there's going to be a limit to how many showtimes that they can actually have per day. That's one of the really bad things about long movies, is that it means that theaters can only show a certain number of screens per day. So it's going to be interesting to look at the show times for that movie on opening night and also on that opening weekend, because I imagine there's going to be some pretty weird show times. I imagine that some theaters might actually be opening up earlier than usual and staying up later than usual, because they're going to have to account for trying to have as many premium showings as well. Again, some people have been talking about the fact that the average ticket price for Avatar 2 is going to be a lot higher, and that's going to be because it's going to have a lot more premium showings than some of the other films. So it's not that tickets are being raised, it's not that theaters are arbitrarily raising the ticket prices on a new release in Avatar. It's rather that because the vast majority of the showings are going to be either in 3D or going to be in IMAX 3D or some of the other premium formats, it means that per theater, if you were to average out the show times and the ticket prices for those show times out, you'll notice that the average ticket price is going to be higher for that film. And so that is also, though, going to have a general impact on Black Panther, because it means with more of those showings taking up Avatar space, Disney is going to probably want to pull Black Panther out of a lot of those spaces as well. They're going to have to, again, find that balance, because they're obviously going to still want Black Panther to be successful, right? Or at least be able to argue that the film is successful. And the only really way that they can even try to do that and have any real argument to do that is for the film to be able to get to the $800+ million range. Even then, you're still dealing with a $400 million loss between this and the first film. So again, you already have a large financial difference between those two movies. Not to mention, comparing the ticket prices from that point to this point in time, you also have to recognize that that's not just a loss of money, there's also a massive loss in audience, because nowadays tickets are a lot more expensive, and so you already have less people going to see that film realistically. When you have a financial loss, in addition to that, that just means that you have even more people that have not seen and are not going to see Black Panther versus that of the first movie, and that, again, I think is something that Disney's probably going to want to try to rectify at the very best of their ability, and the only way they can really do that is to keep the film out in as many screens for as long as possible. But obviously, Avatar needing to make over $1 billion to break even. I talked about this in my live stream the other day. James Cameron claims it's $2 billion to break even. I think that's a bunch of hogwash. I think that is just him kind of bloviating about just how expensive his movie actually is. If that were actually true, his production budget would have to be $800 million, and that is just so unrealistic for a singular film to cost that amount of money. I just do not even see how anyone could possibly spend that much money on one singular film. Even James Cameron, even at $300 million, even at a 3+ hour movie, it just would be, to me, almost mathematically impossible for someone to spend. I know, River, it's crazy. It's crazy. River loves math, and she's like, that's mathematically impossible. So that's why I have my doubts about what James Cameron's saying there as far as that film is concerned. Violent Night is another film that is going to have again, pretty strong percentage drop this weekend. This is going to be the second weekend for Violent Night. Had a better than expected opening weekend. Expected to make another $8.2 million, bringing its total domestic to 25.5. As I said last weekend, it looks like this film, because of a very small budget, is going to be able to make its money back. River's very excited about that. River, I hear you. I know. It's exciting. It's great. Anyway, Strange World, even though the percentage drop isn't all that terrible, because this film has made basically nothing at any point in its release, it is still projected to be a $200 million loss for Disney. The menu hanging out around 28% drop. So again, those are good numbers for the menu. Still needs to be able to continue to push on and on and on if it's going to hit its break-even point. But again, still a possibility for it. Devotion, the $90 million flop from Sony, dealing with the Korean War. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but financially, it is a box office flop. Is expected to hang around a little bit as well from Sony. So it'll be interesting to see how many theaters this has stayed at, especially with, again, Avatar coming out next weekend. Again, do you see studios start to pull back in certain areas, or do you see them try to push things forward? It'll be interesting to see how that happens. I heard the Bells is a Fathom events, so again, those I typically don't really track all that much. Black Adam is still in the frame as well, making $1.1 million, bringing its total domestic to $166 million. So I just talked about this on Twitter, actually. Someone had tagged me, shout out to Victor Fontaine, who had tagged me in a tweet from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who said, "Way to confirm with the financiers before I shared the excellent Black Adam news, our film will profit." Again, I don't know what world you're living in, Dwayne, but yeah, your film is not going to be a box office profit. As I said here, this is factually not based in reality from a strict box office standpoint. If he wants to talk alternative revenue streams, that's one thing. As a theatrical release at the box office, it was an objective failure. And again, if you want to go ahead and see the numbers for that and why that is the case, you can check out my website, ombreviews.com. And you can see that at $384 million, as of the last time I updated this on the 4th, the film was around $69 million in the red. based on the numbers that we're seeing that this film's expected to get this weekend, the chance of this film getting to $400 million international or $400 million domestically is possible, but it's going to have to basically drag itself to that finish line. And internationally, the film is pretty much done. So this film is going to be north of a $50 million loss. Now, when I mentioned saying from a box office standpoint, yes, this film clearly is a box office flop, and this is something that is just kind of par for the course when it comes to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers films have been flops for quite a while. They've had a lot more flops than successes in the last couple of years, especially. But the reason why I mentioned other revenue streams is because, okay, if he's talking to financiers, right? If he's talking about how product placement has been able to make up the grounds there, okay, that's one aspect of it, right? If he's trying to talk about how maybe PVOD sales or other things like that are making up for it, okay, that's a very different thing than saying that it's a box office success, right? And so I think that is something ultimately that we do have to keep in mind. Now, he is just saying our film will profit, so he is not necessarily saying it's a box office hit, but the fact that he's going on to say at almost $400 million worldwide, we are building our new franchise step by step, right? Our new franchise step by step. First Captain America did $370 million. Yes, the first Captain America did that money. And also, you're not adjusting that for inflation, it seems. So I just want to, again, be very clear that Dwayne is very much trying to hype up his movie, trying to make the film seem like it's a lot more successful than it actually is. But from a box office standpoint, Dwayne, you are completely off base there. Anyway, Fableman's still going to be limited, so can't say much about it. Spoiler alert, getting a wider release. Apparently, this film has now been out for at least a week or two. And then Ticket to Paradise, I actually got to see this. I'm going to have a review out hopefully tomorrow morning on that. Again, shout out to Universal for actually sending me a review copy. Finally was able to see it, and it's fine. Gave it a 3.5-star rating, which for me is about a B-. Again, it's a typical rom-com featuring older actors, and it really just it comes across in a lot of ways as, oh, two actors wanted to go off to an exotic location to film a movie. Okay, and they have on-screen chemistry. So, ultimately, as a general audiences are not going to really be offended by this film because they're going to have fun with just the fact that they're going to live vicariously through these actors on screen as they go to this very beautiful location. Again, it's just, as a story, it's, kind of just by the numbers a little bit. But anyway, so that's Ticket to Paradise. But what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to make $12.7 million? Again, remember, Box Office Pro's numbers come from their own metrics, so you might see some different projections coming out from the likes of Deadline, for instance. Deadline will usually take what's the so-called industry standard, so they typically will take what the studio thinks it's going to make. And usually that comes in a little bit later, whereas Box Office Pro, they try to look at, okay, what are the trends? How is the movie looking day to day from the week standpoint? Historically, where do the films fall? And other things like that account for where they get their numbers from. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off. Last weekend they were off, so for all we know, this weekend it could be as well. But again, that sounds about right to me, though, for a film in its 5th week of release with no real competition and also with no new releases being a big factor there. As last weekend, Violent Night was a new release. Did better than expected. And then also, I think that Box Office Pro underestimated that the box office was going to have a massive drop from the holiday weekend. And I had been saying, okay, well, if the movie does make a 50% drop, that's going to be very, very, good news for this movie. It didn't. It actually ended up being much more realistic with the over 60% drop instead. And so the 28% drop, though, 5th week of release, sounds a little bit more correct again from last weekend, which was again a weekend that had a much larger drop off. We tend to see that happen in the long run. But the big question is going to be, is the film going to be able to continue to make money domestically and more importantly internationally to be able to get to the $800 million mark? Again, at this point in time, it's almost at $400 million domestically. So kind of going back once again to what Dwayne Johnson was trying to say about Black Adam. Yeah, this film's almost gotten to $400 million domestically. Your film has barely gotten to or barely over $400 million internationally. So I just wanted to, again, bring that into perspective. Right now, Black Panther is at $735 million, so it's going to easily be able to pass up the box office for Thor: Love and Thunder, and that's why, based off of the trends, it seems $800 to $850 million is the likely endpoint for this movie. But we will, of course, have to wait and see. Let me know your thoughts, though, about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, the fire button, honestly, smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Shout out to Chris from the 80s. You are awesome. Check him out over on YouTube at the same channel. The same name of his channel, Chris from the 80s. for being an upgrade of the Patreon membership, and to everyone else who are still members from the month of November. You guys are great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. A blessed feast of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my November Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with Patreon with Father Luca Illich. Thank you very much, Father. Garrett Searles, Jaimir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can check out on YouTube at his channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who also has a YouTube channel that you can check out at Eagle Writer, and Miss Martin Muses, who also has a YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Tina B, where she hosts the show with Stephanie B, one of my mods, and one of my Valkyrie, called Soup to Nuts. Check out Soup to Nuts, and it premieres pretty much every Friday. So again, shout out to all of my Patreon people, also to all my Subscribe Star people, starting off with Matt317. Check him out on Twitch at Matt317. The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. And ZK Man you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co to follow him as he starts his podcast, and also for many of his musical musings as well. Check him out. Very, very talented guy. And then lastly, my locals peeps. We got Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan. How about a hockey player? UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win. J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer, Robert Barnes. Thank you all so very much for supporting me. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, go ahead and check out the top link in the video description below, where you get access to that. Also, you get access to special things like giveaways, and also exclusive podcasts that I do with John the Flickpick Flickinger and other guests throughout the month of November and in the previous and the months to follow as well. And again, if any of that sounds interesting to you, especially the 4K giveaways, Steelbook giveaways, some of them that I have to give away this month are films like Starship Troopers on 4K Steelbook, Top Gun Maverick on 4K Steelbook, amongst many others. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the link and follow the instructions down below. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.